It's because this is recorded. They could watch it if they need to. And with that, I will turn it over to the indomitable David Fink.
Hi, Dominic. I actually, not to be funny about this, but I would really like to turn it over to you guys. I mean, thanks for inviting me, but I kind of want to be here. I wanted to be here to answer the questions that you have. So, unless you have questions, I can go through the timeline. I can talk about what other towns are doing with their housing committees. I can talk about what ideas you may want to proceed with. But I kind of feel like you guys have a pretty good handle on it. I watched the whole uh, meeting that you recorded last that Kathy sent me a link to on YouTube. Very clear to me that you guys have learned a lot and you know exactly what you're doing. So maybe we ought to just start with questions that you guys have, and then we can just kind of you know get into it and let the whole thing evolve. So. What do you guys have in mind? What do you need to know? What can I help you with?
You're on mute, Dominic.
I'll just start it, but I think one of the issues that I think you can be helpful, and other members can jump in, is how we engage in the outreach to the community besides the survey and everything, and we intend on doing our own.
Right.
How do we engage in the outreach to the community? I mean, especially in this situation where we're not able to do the one-on-one, face-to-face, way.
Okay. Well, first of all, let's just start with the survey. So, as you guys probably know by now, the survey has been extended till October 15th. So, responses will come in. I just told Kathy that my guess is that at that point, any survey responses that were done on paper at town halls and community centers, senior centers, other places will be collected on the 15th or 16th, tabulated and put in with the Survey Monkey responses. And so towns are likely to have the results within a week afterward. Um, when I mean, a survey is great because it gives you some idea. But as you know, we've learned over the years, everything is relative, and the best survey is going to be the one that you guys do, which either replicates questions that are on the initial survey or adds additional questions. I mean, I would advise that of the questions that are on the initial survey, you may want to replicate the ones in the second survey in January or February that are um, the valuable to you because you want to see change. And in between this survey and the one you do, early next year, which I would advise is probably the time to do it. You want to see change. You want to see whether or if there is any change, and have people's attitudes change. In between, I think to answer your question, Dominic, I think it's important to hold forums for the residents and meetings with town officials. I mean, like I said, when I watched your YouTube video, it's very clear to me that all of you, having gone through what you've gone through this year, have learned a great deal about housing and a great deal about housing in your town. If I were you, though, I would not presume that everybody in town knows as much as you guys do. Because housing, we used to say at the Partnership for Strong Communities when I was there, is a tap water issue. Everybody goes to the sink in the morning to wash their face and brush their teeth. They turn on the water and it comes out, and they have no idea how it got there. Point being, housing's the same way. Most people have housing, but they don't really think about how it has come to be that they have it, except that they could write a check for a down payment for a home. But how it actually got built and who put it there and who made those decisions, they've never thought about because generally towns are not proactive about housing creation. It was, how towns, especially in Connecticut, the suburban towns, just grew. Some guy bought, 40 acres and he put 40, single family homes on them and he sold them in about a week and everybody, was happy. Um, Now towns are finding, because of demographic change, because baby boomers want to downsize and millennials have a lot of education debt and need something more affordable, and housing prices have appreciated, uh, that towns have to be a little more proactive, figuring out what their housing they have and what they need and where they're going to put it. So to do that, I think it's important, uh, for housing committees, and we have really, really good examples of people you can talk to in towns like Fairfield and Stonington and Old Saybrook, Guilford, that have had housing committees for a number of years and have learned how to educate their residents. Because, again, as you know, given how much you guys have learned, there's a lot to learn. And there's some real basics. I would not just stop with the residents in town. I would see, and I'm happy to come and facilitate meetings with town officials. Not everybody on your zoning commission probably knows as much about housing creation as you might hope they would. Not everybody on the board of selectmen or the board of finance or the planning commission, or frankly, the school board knows as much about how housing affects their work as they could. So, what we have offered at SCROG is for me to facilitate meetings with town officials that you think it's important for me to meet with, and have forums for town residents. And at those forums, we can talk about, it's kind of housing 101. What I don't do ever is tell any town what they ought to do. It's not my place to tell them. Plus, I don't know as much about your town as you guys do. What I do is tell you what other towns are doing, and other towns are, doing some, kind of creative and smart stuff. I show them what has been built in other towns, and basically, it's a fairly simple equation. The first thing that has to be done with residents is disabuse them of the misconceptions they have that housing lowers property values and brings crime and increases school costs, which research has shown and anecdotal evidence has shown is all baloney. And then once you can kind of disabuse them of, then you show them why it may be in their interest to create a wider range of housing options and how they can go about figuring out where to put it. And then show them examples. So, because a lot of people believe that, uh, what you guys are thinking about on the housing committee is plopping Father Panic Village down in the middle of Woodbridge, and that's not true. And we can show them examples of really attractive, well-designed, thoughtful, mixed income housing. So a lot of market rate units and a portion that are income restricted in towns like Darien and New Canaan and Fairfield and Avon and towns that are, upper middle class, wealthy towns that have figured out how to do it by figuring out the right place to put it so that people don't feel like their town is, being changed. For all of us who took a little behavioral psychology in college, that a primary problem for a lot of people is the idea of loss. They don't want to lose what they have, and people live in Woodbridge and a lot of the towns that they live in because they love it there and they don't want to see it change. They don't want to lose what they have. So you have to show them, as Dominic, my son Ben, as he has pointed out. He said to me, Dad, sometimes you have to tell people that in order for the town to stay the same, it's got to change a little bit. Well, that's counterintuitive for a lot of people, but you can show people that, and you can show people that we can put the housing we need for the people we need in the places that we can all agree upon. So, I mean, I'm happy to do that, and that's my offer to you guys: is if you want me to come to town and talk to groups of town officials, if you want me to come and facilitate a forum for people in town, that's the way, to answer your question, Dominic, to appeal to them. I'll stay there for 2 hours and I'll answer every question that they have. But that's what you have to do. The survey itself is a great way as an opener. And then you can put whatever forum you do on the website and people can look at that. For you as members of the housing committee, if there are Rotary clubs and Masonic groups and congregations in town, you guys have to be the kind of disciples that go out and spread a little bit of the gospel and answer some of their questions. But that's the way to do it. Um, One last thing I would mention to you is when I was in Guilford about 5 or 6 years ago, we created a couple of videos, one without sound and one with sound. The one without sound had about 14 or 15 people that people knew in town, business people, realtors, young professionals, the superintendent of schools, the first selectman, and they all held up a whiteboard and they said, Guilford needs a wider array of housing options because, and they filled it in. And the one without sound played on a continuous loop in the lobby of the public library, which, if you've been in Guilford, everybody uses. And so people would walk in and they'd stop and they'd see this loop and they'd see Dominic on there holding up a whiteboard. And they go home and say, Hey, Mabel, you never believe this. I saw Dominic holding up a whiteboard, and start talking about it. That gets the conversation going. We also created a video with sound that got played, like I said, at the Rotary Club and the League of Women Voters and different congregations. And again, you want to get conversation going. So for now, I'll finish up and then you can ask me questions. For now, your job is to make sure that you get as wide a response in the survey as possible. You want to make sure that paper copies are in all the places where older residents who are not, facile with computers go, and have them filled out and make sure there's somebody at that place who collects them. And then you want to really play it up on the website and in social media and in emails to everybody in town and say, please fill out the housing survey. This is your chance. And that's the first thing you do. And once the survey's in, set up meetings. I sent something out today, a second email to all the towns in the Scrog region saying, hey, I'm available for meetings, forums in towns through Thanksgiving. But you got to set it up now because the dates are going to get taken. So you have to stop and think now, is there a date that you want me? And like I said, I'm vaccinated. I'm going to get my booster. I don't mind standing at the front of the room in a room full of people and taking questions and for 2 hours. I have a great, if I don't mind saying so myself, PowerPoint presentation that will take people through all of this and explain a lot of it to them. And then I'll stand there for as long as it takes and answer all the questions. But that's how you have to do it. Otherwise, the RKG is going to create a housing plan for Woodbridge that is going to be minus as much input as you really want. Because you really don't want people to say RKG is jamming something down our throat. You really want to make people understand that they had a chance in this survey. They had a chance to come to a forum. You guys are going to take a second survey. RKG is going to meet with the town on 3 different occasions to give them an opportunity, town officials, to shape this plan. So, there's really, a really good opportunity for the residents and officials of Woodbridge to create their own plan. RKG is just going to do the hard part. They're going to write it for you and do some of the background research, but they'll do as much as they have to. If town residents don't want to be involved, then RKG will just write what they write.
Any of the members have any questions for David at this point?
I have this is Mary Dean. Just about what you just said. We're dealing with you were talking about 2 separate surveys, the one from the RKG and the one that we anticipate producing and rolling out early in the new year. I was a little confused about the relationship between that second survey and the proposed public meeting, whether it be online or hybrid or whatever. Would the meeting would be before our survey, but after this first survey, correct? It would be. I got that right.
That's the way I would do it.
Yeah.
You guys can do it the way you want, but I guess my thought is that it's like when we were all in school, Mary. You do a pre-test, and then you teach the lesson, and you do a post-test. And if you can get some sense of people's thoughts, fears, desires, attitudes in the first survey, and then have a forum and other materials which we can make available, and let them kind of learn a little bit more, because you guys know a lot, but you shouldn't presume that they all know as much as you guys know. Um, and then you do the second survey. And like I said, you can ask some different questions, but I would probably, want to replicate some of the questions from the first survey and see what kind of movement there's been.
The other reason that I personally would like to see our public outreach start, if not complete, as early as possible, is that, speaking for myself, I know a lot about the subject, but I don't have, shall we say, a common message that this committee is all um, buying into, that we all have the same language, that we all have the same responses to the same questions. And if you do that for us in public, then we can take those answers and run with them. But otherwise, we are each making up the answers, as we will be doing in the next few weeks, each one of us for our, in our outreach work. And I think it's much better if we have common text.
That's fine, and I have, and I can send it to you guys, the PowerPoint that I would use,
Uh-huh.
and you could look at that, and I will, pretty much use that as the presentation, and then you guys can have it and take whatever notes you want to take about to fill in, where maybe I don't write everything out, but the basic idea is that, like I said, and this is what the PowerPoint does, to say, look, you know, when I was at the Partnership for Strong Communities, we said strong communities need all kinds of people, and all kinds of people need all kinds of housing. So what that means is you need a range, and and I know. I mean, I'm 70 years old now, and I need a different place now than I needed when I was 25, and that I needed when I was 50. And my kids are gone, and now we're thinking of downsizing. I mean, people's lives change over a period of years. Plus, you have a lot of people that you need in town, who, don't make as much money as people think. I mean, one thing that I have learned, if I've learned nothing else over the years, is that people either never had perspective or they've lost perspective on issues of income. So, if I live in West Hartford, if we got 100 West Hartford residents in a room and asked you, how many of you lower class, middle class, and upper class, about 5 would admit to being lower class, and 5 would admit to being upper class, and all the other 90 people would say we're middle class. Well, that's not true. Most of them are upper class or upper middle class. But, everybody can always point to somebody who's richer than they are. And my point being that, and you guys may know this, but I'd bet you $100 that 95% of the people in Woodbridge do not know that 21% of the households in Woodbridge are Alice households or in poverty. And you guys know what Alice is. And that's $90,000 for a household of 4 and about $28,000 for an individual. I mean, those people are working poor, and they're invisible. Nobody sees them, so they don't realize, a lot of people in town, that there are people in town doing important jobs who are struggling. And if the carburetor goes, or mom's hours get cut at the Walmart, they have hard trouble making ends meet. So, it's a matter of, uh, explaining a lot of this stuff to people. And, I've been to Woodbridge. I have good friends in Woodbridge. It's a great town. There are mostly good people there. Yeah, there are some people who are, kind of difficult, but every town has people like that. I think if you can explain a lot of this stuff to people and say, look, we just need to widen the housing options. And like I said, we're not looking to pop down the projects in the middle of, single family homes. We have certain areas in town where we can look at hard, and there are ways to develop this housing. There are ways to bring developers here who are good developers, who are not going to take advantage of the town and build really nice stuff. And they're mission driven, and they know how to do it. They provide you with a great product. This is all doable. It's been done. So, I mean, I think it's possible, but I really do think that you have to, try to educate the town.
So forgive me if I'm taking too much of your time, but I did have one more question. You mentioned meeting with town officials, board of selectmen, and so forth, or that are the whoever they are. organization is already planning to do that. Is that what you're meaning? Or that we have to initiate that stage?
Well, I mean, I think you should talk to Beth. I think you should talk to whoever you guys have to talk to. But I know that some of the most successful meetings I've had in towns, I get the Board of Selectmen, the Planning and Zoning Board, and the Board of Education all in the same room at the same time. Because housing creation or the lack of the housing you need affects all of them.
Hmm.
And and it used to be that and frankly by design, Dominic knows this, zoning boards were thought, they wanted zoning boards to be independent because they wanted land use decisions to be independent of politics.
Hmm.
Well, they can't be now because housing has a direct effect. Given towns in Connecticut, which get 95% of their revenue from the property tax, revenues depend on the housing you have. And the problem with a lot of towns in Connecticut is they have a surplus of single family homes. And right now, the market doesn't want those as much as they want multifamily homes because demographically we have baby boomers who are wanting to downsize. And like I said, millennials, their children who got a lot of education debt and they can't afford a single family home. They can't get a mortgage, or even if they could, they don't want to take on any more debt. So the point being that you know zoning boards need to understand that if the town is going to pay its bills, it needs property tax revenue. And that means an understanding of what the market wants. And the market wants multifamily housing now. And that comes in a lot of different shapes and sizes. And it can be done beautifully and fit its surroundings. But, the school board needs to understand that uh, you know, they don't always understand the idea that if you build certain kinds of housing, you don't get a lot of school children who are supposedly going to, inundate your schools and knock up your school budget. I mean, frankly, a lot of them probably do understand, and the research shows that the only thing that really affects school budgets are healthcare costs, energy costs, and labor costs. Unless you have to add a school or add classrooms or textbooks or teachers, you don't get an increase in the school budget from building housing, but a lot of people think so. So, everybody's in this together, and the selectmen who have to write the budget, balance it, and vote on it, and the zoning commission that has a great impact on the revenue, the property tax revenue in the town, and the school board that has to deal with the idea of larger, enrollments or not. They all should be involved. Whether you guys and the powers that be in town want to put them all in the same room at the same time, that's up to you guys. I've done it. I'm happy to do it, and I think it's a really good conversation.
I mean,
What about when we're not town officials but residents? In
Right.
in your experience, is it better to have target groups that you focus on, for instance, the PTA,
Sure.
or teachers or League of Women Voters, or does that not matter so much? Does-
That's a really good question. When worked with, I worked with different towns, and they say, "Well, who should be on this housing committee?" And from everything I can tell, you guys have a really good group. There are people who have, for lack of a better term, tentacles out into the wider community, who have friends and neighbors. They belong to organizations. They're part of, uh, large congregations. They know people in town. When I was in Guilford, what they did was they had a kind of moribund interfaith council that had not been doing much for years. Well, they reinvigorated that, and then they added the first selectman, the state rep, the head of the United Way, the clergymen of the two largest congregations, a few business people on the green, a few realtors, the superintendent of schools. And these were people who knew people in town. And like I said, had some reach, and I think you're right. It's good to target, go to the PTA meeting and go to the Rotary Club meeting and go to the League of Women Voters meeting. But a lot of these conversations that really matter happen in aisle 8 of the Stop and Shop on Saturday, or along the sidelines of the soccer game, because somebody says, "What's that housing committee trying to do? They're trying to jam that." No, no, no. This is what we're doing. And then they go home and they talk to their friends. I mean, those are the conversations that matter. So, yeah, I think you have to be pointed in your effort to reach out to certain groups and talk to 25 people at once. But it's also good to have people who get around and run into people in the hardware store.
Yeah.
David, right now, the town does not allow in-person meetings for town boards and commissions. Do you think it'll be effective to have a Zoom meeting and try to, get all these different boards and commissions together on a Zoom meeting to maybe do your PowerPoint presentation?
My mother, if she was still alive, would tell you that I'm always very effective. Whether it will be or not, we'll do the best we can. I mean, like I said, if the town were to make an exception and wanted it, and everybody agreed because they're all vaccinated and want to be in the same room, I'm telling you, I'm happy to do that. But if it needs to be via Zoom, we'll do it via Zoom.
Buddy, it's Chris. I've sent an email off to Betsy Yagla because all of us staff in the town hall and the other buildings are going to a mandatory meeting tomorrow at 9 in the auditorium. So I fired off a question to her, which I'll hopefully have an answer to tomorrow, about how many people they're having meet in there. Because if all you're doing is talking about having members of the Board of Selectmen and Town Planning and Zoning and Board of Ed meet, we may be able to do something in person that way in that room. So I'll check that out for you.
That sounds great, Chris. Do you think you'll be able to, if she does allow for, 30 or 40 people, is that something you can send out an email to all the different boards and commissions and find a date that works?
I wouldn't send it to all of them, but if you want to pinpoint specific groups that you want to meet with, certainly we can do that.
Could we do it hybrid? I mean, could we have, if this is Housing 101, and then it's going to be useful information for everybody, whether they're in town government or whether they're just an individual resident. So could we combine the two? We don't have a lot of time here. That's worrying me a lot. So I would like to have a Housing 101, the kind of community presentation that you were talking about, targeted, generally recorded so that we can use it. And who you want to have in the audience could be anybody, I mean, I've seen enough of these done that I know they're very effective and that people will, put their questions in the chat and you get the usual questions. And so you get to have the usual answers. And I would think we should just do that as quickly as possible. That would be my vote.
Yeah, I have no problem with a hybrid meeting, but I may have missed this. But what time frame are we looking at having?
I'd do it now.
Lou, David had mentioned before Thanksgiving, but I do think that the meeting with the government boards, and I would just add to what David said, the Board of Finance, the Board of Finance, Board of Selectmen, the Board of Ed, and Planning and Zoning. And because I think that brings in basically the four corners of what they have to deal with. But I think that meeting should be separate than the public. I'm hoping, that as we go over the next couple of weeks or so, I know there's already beginning to be some modest decline. Of course, we're in a state that's, very highly vaccinated, and hopefully the decline will be better, that we can potentially come up with a situation of the public meeting. Or if not, then Mary, I think the idea of the hybrid public meeting is not a bad idea. In other words, having it on Zoom or WebEx, along with having it, a group in person, like at the auditorium. Chris, where are you having the meeting tomorrow? You having it in?
We're having it in the gymnasium of the center building.
Right.
Which is the largest meeting space short of emptying the bays at the firehouse.
Yeah. So I think that would be the goal. I mean, I think we we can focus now on getting the survey back. We don't want to wait too long. We would like to line something up for David, but I'm hoping like maybe, for instance, by early November, there'll be a certain change where we can at least do it that way. But I think Chris can send out to the to Beth, to the chairmen of the other three boards that we would like to do this. We would like to set up such a meeting, whether it be that one might be able to be more easily done via WebEx. But I think even then, if this meeting goes off well tomorrow, we can possibly have a meeting with the boards in person, because it's important, as David mentioned, I think, to educate and educate them on a couple of things. And David, I look to you as to how you do that in other towns. There are most people that I talk to look at you cross-eyed sometimes if you say to them that there's a housing shortage. How do you convince them there's a housing shortage? And another thing which I think applies very directly to Woodbridge was the result of a conversation that took place this past weekend over a pleasant dinner in Algonquin, Maine, with very close friends of ours who are attempting to downsize in Newtown and want to stay in Newtown. And they have nowhere to go. Their position is, we'd like to find a attached condo unit and such a thing, and there are so few in there. And all I could think of as they were talking was, I should have videotaped them and played it at a meeting in Woodbridge. The same question of, where do you go in Woodbridge? When you're everybody thinks, well, you're old. I'm old. I'm at the top of the boomer generation. I don't want to go. I'm not going into an assisted living. If I want to downsize, I want to go into an apartment, a luxury apartment. I may want to go into a condo. We have the same issue in Woodbridge. So, David, have you had experience in convincing, or how do you generate that to the public? Is that part of your PowerPoint?
Yeah, I mean, it's different in a lot of towns, but I think Woodbridge, I would guess, I haven't looked at your numbers closely for a couple of years. I took a quick glance the other day. I mean, there are a lot of towns that, because most of the towns in Connecticut, and I would bet Woodbridge is one of these, built the bulk of their housing, 40% or more, since 1970. Why is that? Because people like me and you, Dominic, were then baby boomers in our 20s, and we wanted a single family home, and so towns built those homes. Now it's 40 years later, or more, 50 years later, and towns still have all those single family homes. Well, like we said earlier, there's not as much demand for those, and so the grand lists in most of those towns have either been flat or fallen in the last 10 years. Not because the homes are not nice, just hasn't been as much demand. So, the price you get for your home is going to be higher if you have 10 people bidding on it than if you have 3. The way to keep your values high is to bring buyers to town. Well, how many people know about Woodbridge? I'd say that, most young families don't even know Woodbridge exists. Well, the way to get them to town is to build the kind of unit they can afford now. And then they find a school, and they find a dock, and they find a church, and they find friends, and they put down some roots, and they decide it's really nice in Woodbridge, and then they decide we're going to stay, and they're going to bid for some of those homes there, and that bids up the price. Then you create this kind of switching places thing, because the condo or the apartment that you built for that young family to attract them to Woodbridge so that they want to stay there, they buy the home of that aging boomer, and the boomer moves into the condo or the apartment that that young family just vacated. In other words, you have to have a range of units for people at different stages of their lives. And, towns have done that and are doing more of it. And one other thing to think about for towns is that unless you have a lot of public transportation and live adjacent to towns that are going to provide you with the nurses' aides and the other help that you need for an aging population. You guys don't have public transportation. You do live on the border of New Haven, but I don't know how easy it is to get there. if people want to age in place in their homes, they better be able to have an aide who's going to be able to get to that home and take care of them during the day. And either you got to have some, a good bus line from New Haven for town, some of those workers to come in, or you have to create some housing for those people so that they can help these people age in place. So, like I said, strong communities need all kinds of people, and all kinds of people need all kinds of housing. And no one is going to ask Woodbridge to put what I can show you is is really attractive, terrific, mixed income housing in certain locations. But there are locations in Woodbridge where you could probably do it. Now, some people will tell me, but our town is built out. Every acre is called for, is in use already. Well, I don't believe that. There is no such thing as built out, because if there was, you'd never see a crane in Manhattan. Properties get repurposed. And I've seen it in different towns where, this, Dominic, in cities, all cities have redevelopment authorities. They are used to the idea of repurposing properties. As a matter of fact, smart cities are proactive about it. They'll walk up to David and say, David, is your property for sale? I'll say, no, it's not for sale. I got a business here. So, well, David, we've decided that your property would be really good for multifamily housing. And if we rezoned it, you could get 2.5, 3 times as much for it because of the need for that housing. Some developer will pay you that much for it. Is your property for sale now? And now David starts thinking, I was going to retire next year anyway. Or people know my business. If I moved it, they'd still find me. Now you can ask 10 Davids that question, and 7 of them may tell you to take a hike, but 3 of them may tell you, yeah, my property could be for sale if you rezone it and up the value. Point is, towns don't know how to do that, but towns can learn, and some towns have done it. I would say that, there are strategies. You can bring developers to town. Dominic, a bunch of developers. They're really good mission-driven, for-profit developers who are willing to make a little less to include some income-restricted units. You bring them to town, you show them places. They'll tell you this is a good spot, this is a good spot, and then it's up to the town what they want to do, redevelop. There are strategies to do this stuff, but the town has to first educate the residents to assure them that you're not bringing the Crips and Bloods to town, and they're not going to, create mayhem. And like I said, there's lots of very, very good evidence and good examples around the state of great mixed income housing that is terrific. No graffiti on the walls, no used syringes on the ground, no bullets flying through the air. Really, really good, solid housing with good people living in it.
Dominic?
Yeah.
Hi, sorry. I just want to point out, and David, hi, West Hartford native over here. All high school. I think that in light of the fact that there are 2 proposals already on the table, I'd mentioned before you hopped on that I actually just left a meeting to hop on this one where one of the companies was, going through their proposal. I think time is of the essence here, that we need to get those meetings with the Board of Selectmen, et cetera, sooner than later, so that we can hopefully, I don't want to use the word manipulate, but assist in actually putting the housing needs within that proposal. As we discussed earlier, as it stands now, there's 22 affordable housing units on the property, which, as we've always said since day one, the Woodbridge Country Club is pretty much the viable area that we can develop on within this town.
Yeah. I was actually going to call that. I was going to bring it up at some point. I know that the first selectmen have encouraged, these people to reach out to the various boards and committees. One would be us. We could certainly invite them to make a presentation. David, are you aware of the Woodbridge Country Club issue?
Peripherally, I've heard about it over the
Right.
years. I'm not an expert.
The issue is there are two forces, and it's good that there's proposals. It's good that they're finally thinking along these lines seriously, and they have a developer come in. The fear in the town, I have been having conversations. The fear is that if there isn't large 4 and 5 bedroom colonials as part of the proposal, the town will vote it down because there has to be a referendum. In a conversation that we had over it, I pointed out that, I understood the possibility, and I maybe overstated the case when I said that the town would then be heading to be called Connecticut's version of Mount Laurel, if they did something like that. And if the people thought that they could, control it. I'm not sure if Woodbridge would vote it down. I mean, the proposal has some interesting aspects of it. It certainly does not have the quantity that I would like, but I do think that we should invite these people to to come to one of our meetings and make a presentation to us. I mean, Nicole, what were you on tonight? What was it? It was just their own presentation.
Right. So I had a Coupop meeting tonight and they presented. But you're right, Dominic. I mean, they definitely have listened to the concerns that come from all different directions regarding open space and environmental issues and conservation and even everything down to the birds in the area. I think and then just by the layout alone, David, I know you haven't had the opportunity to look at it, but by layout alone, they're not changing the actual land. And with that, I mean, it's a very hilly terrain. They're not touching that. They're building around that. And I understand, and they want to build these huge, as Dominic referred to them, colonials on that will be the perimeter of this property. So with shared driveways, et cetera, so there will not be a lot of um, entryways, for lack of better words, into the property. And then in the center of the property, I'm just pretty much paraphrasing here. I mean, it's an entire proposal, but basically in the center, it'd be a mix of medium-sized homes, age-restricted homes, market value, the medium-sized home market value, with only 11 affordable housing age restricted and only 11 medium home uh, um, affordable housing. So, for our purposes, I mean, again, they were listening to, as Dominic said, people do not want it to look like, this always comes up, the orange um, development on Route 34. We all have heard this before. So, it does have these dynamics within the proposal, which Dominic's right. I think that it really touches upon everything that everybody wants. However, for our purposes, we know what the percentages are of affordable housing available in town. And it would be a shame for us not to try to capitalize on trying to squeeze out as many as we can, knowing that many developers, obviously limit that or they don't make an income or, a profit on it. And I spoke to him and I said, "How amenable are you, or is this, an all or nothing?" Which I know it never is, but sometimes we have had people come in who are not willing to work with us as much as others, and they do want to talk to all of us about what the needs are in town. I think that's where we come in. I think that's why this survey is where it is. I think that will hopefully be able to help us. But the problem is, and Dominic, getting back to the original point, is that I think that we need to, and I don't like to say educate because I feel like it seems like a negative thing to say in regard to our commissions, but I think we do need to educate them regarding what it is that we're doing and what we need to do and what it really, really means for the town. So we can get them on board so they ask the same questions of the developer over and over again.
You know,
I do want to add with the with the new zoning regulations, they are gonna have to increase the amount of affordable housing there because if they have a multifamily development, they have to go to 20% affordable.
I'm sorry, Catherine, they are at 20% because of the amount of units that they are putting on the property. They are not taking into consideration when determining the 20%. That I asked them that specific question actually
No.
tonight. They are not taking into consideration when making the calculations, the big homes on the outsides, only
I
the
don't see how
homes
they could get away
within.
with that.
Yeah.
It's
So
total
and then
development.
right, exactly. Number
Yeah.
one. So okay, so we can squeeze maybe a couple of units out of that after that to 20%. I just kind of left it where it was. I'm sure that will be addressed. But they're also keep in mind, they're not making a lot of units on that property. You look at the development, there are not a lot of units. So 20% maybe squeezes out what, 28 units, 25, maybe 25 units, I think, because right now they're 22 units is
Yeah, I
20%.
think 29, they'd have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, not taking into consideration, I think it's what, I forget how many homes are in the perimeter, maybe 17, but that may be too high.
It's, it's, a, it's a missed opportunity. And, I know things don't necessarily move fast, but they can. And I think, both Dominic and Nicole have both, combined the two. We should speak to the developers. I'm not sure how much influence we'll have over them, but let them know what the concerns are. But we should also speak to the select people, because they're going to make the decision, and they can put more pressure than we can.
Well, and Lou, that's part of the problem, is that when you have the conversation with the boards, the response is going to be, because it's the response I got, you can convince the Board of Selectmen all you want. The town has to do it by referendum. And the proposal that the nuts and bolts of the proposal are such that, and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I was told that the existing zoning regulation that they just passed will allow them to do exactly what they're going to do without a zone change. And that if the transaction goes through, if the town votes it, then that's the fear, that the townspeople in a referendum will not approve a substantial development of middle housing. Let's not even talk about affordable housing. Let's talk about a substantially sized development of middle housing, of a combination of apartments, condos, cluster homes, that they will not do it, and that the way to get it, we need, it's a desperate need to sell it. It's a desperate need for not a desperate need. Maybe I'm overstating it. It's a need that it be sold for economics, for the economics of getting out from under the debt and everything, and that by ringing it with $800,000 4 and 5 bedroom colonials, then the people that are around it will feel safer, because they have, actually, along where they're putting it, homes a hell of a lot bigger than theirs across the street from them. And then over by the clubhouse, and this does involve tearing down the clubhouse, putting in a new clubhouse, a new gathering place, a pool, and stuff like that. That's, these are the amenities that they're putting out. By doing it that way, they expect to get the people to vote it. And that's their fear. That's the afraid. If we don't do this, the people will vote it down, because
Can I
they.
ask a question?
But if we don't have the select board on the side pushing this, there's no chance of getting it.
Right. Well, I agree with you.
Can I ask a question? How is the developer chosen, and is the town committed to this developer?
From my information, and anybody else could jump in if they know better, 2 developers came forward.
They're
These developers haven't
unsolicited.
been chosen yet. They're still being vetted. One proposal was online. I was able to take a look at one. I haven't seen the second one, but I know there's supposedly a second developer. Oh, wait a minute. If there's a possibility the second developer is related to New England Brewing, that wants to move up there and build 100 attached units. Again, hearsay. But this other developer are supposedly, David, I haven't vetted them yet. Honestly, haven't had the time. They aren't somebody from local reasons. I mean, certainly, if there wasn't this fear of having to have a vote on it, I could probably bring David, you know, two or three
Yeah.
up the road who would certainly be interested in alone or in combination with others doing things. The Woodbridge Country Club property can't. I want to say something, and I think Nicole pointed it out. Very easily developable along the in accordance with its topography, which would reduce the, especially if you're doing high density residential, that would reduce the amount of site work. One thing about high density residential, if done right, it doesn't have to be flat. It can certainly be done in an appropriate way. I can vouch for the hilliness of the golf club, having walked it numerous times, dragged myself up some of those hills. But it's a beautiful piece of property, and it can be developed while preserving easily 40% of it for still open space, which, by the way, Woodbridge has an abundance of in town.
Well, the only reason I ask is it's not for me to say how the town does its business. It's not, but other towns that I've dealt with, when they have a piece of property like that, they put out an RFP and they ask a lot of developers to offer ideas, and then they pick the best ones for people to consider. But to just artificially decide on one or two is not what most towns do.
With David, see, that's the problem, and I understand what you're pointing out, but other towns don't have to deal with the fact, and this is the fear they have, that you have to have a referendum for the townspeople to approve the sale. So in most towns, it would go out to RFP, it would come back, there would be appraisals, the usual process. That's sort of not what happens here. So,
okay, well,
but I still think we need to give input. We need to give input. We don't need to be obstructionist or anything like that, but we need to at least provide our input.
Well, again, there's no one place in any town to put higher density housing. There are other places in town where it could be put. And, back when I was in Woodbridge 6 or 7 years ago, talking to the first selectman then and the zoning board, they were focused on the flats area, and you guys know that better than I.
You're right, David. There are two places in town to put it. One is the two pieces at the end of the flats, which may be changing right now from what they have been approved for. So there's a possibility that exists there, but that possibility is evolving. That is owned by private property, not owned by the town, I believe. So that could be developed, but not to the extent that Nicole was talking about as to how many units you would get.
But Dominic, I feel like we had this conversation before, and we had discussed possibly providing input to the Board of Selectmen, to Beth, as to what we as a housing committee recommend should be the Woodbridge Country Club, because I mean David's right, and where in the towns that I worked, if you want to develop the piece of property, you put it out for RFP, and it even could be like an exploratory RFP. We're soliciting ideas as to what could go on to this Woodbridge Country Club, and you get a whole bunch of ideas to select from, as opposed to these two ideas. I'm not sure where they came in from. But I think it's incumbent on us to say, hey, this is a golden opportunity. This is what we'd like to see, because we're supposed to be making recommendations to the Board of Selectmen, as I understood it, to say, this is an opportunity for us to address, at least a portion of our affordable housing, and we feel that X amount should be on this property, and perhaps recommend that this go out for an RFP so we can generate more ideas.
So I'm just going to step in real quick and just ask, because I've already contacted at least the one developer that was proposing for the Woodbridge Country Club. I again will reach out to him and see if he or the other person can join your meeting next week so that you can have some kind of meeting with them. But then if you want to schedule a meeting and perhaps have it with David moderating it, or however you want to look at it, with the Board of Selectmen, Board of Finance, P and Z, if you want to throw in the Board of Ed, by all means do so. But that would also be an opportunity not to just educate them about housing, but also to discuss from your perspective as a committee, what you think the opportunities are offered to the town through the Woodbridge Country Club. And we could get that done sooner rather than later. So if that's where you want to go, I will do what I need to do tomorrow when I come into work and try to get that moving.
I think that's a great idea to try, especially if they could possibly come next Wednesday and we could talk to the developer. I understand the issue of the referendum, but my feeling is I have a different look at it. My feeling is you aim high. I do believe the fear is real, but it's not based on uh, what I heard during the zoning meetings. That there is a large number of people in this town that do realize the need for affordable housing. But my feeling is this: if you aim high, if you lose, you go to Plan B. And I think that's a greater philosophy because I think right now you can get many developers coming in to do the various development of the Woodbridge Country Club, which is a gem of a piece of property, and which, David, is the one piece of property that has the three legs of the stool: sewer, water, and public transportation. Although the public transportation, I put a preliminary call into Connecticut Transit to say, I've already developed your bus route to get the bus up to the Woodbridge Country Club and then down into New Haven, which isn't that bad. So what did the other members think of? Do you want to invite them into next Wednesday's, the developer into next Wednesday's, and then talk about setting up a special meeting with the boards sometime in early October or mid-October?
I think that's a great idea, Tom.
Very good idea, yes.
Yeah. Sometime right after Columbus Day or something along those lines.
Yes.
And if we're going to meet more than once a month, they have to meet more than once a month.
And in terms of the referendum, David, wasn't there a similar situation in Newtown where they want to develop, was it Fairfield Hills or some piece of property, and they had the same concern? They were scared about putting it out to referendum because they were worried about, that people would turn this development down. And then they finally did put it out to referendum, and people voted for it.
Right.
So,
but that's the point. I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not going to tell you guys and your town what to do. If there was time before, I mean, this is the idea of talking to residents and educating them about this. I mean, why are they, do they want, what this developer has proposed? Because they're afraid that more units and higher density is going to, like I said, create, a terrible housing project. I don't know what's in their mind, but you can imagine what's in their mind. And that's why you want to show them pictures of what's been done in other places and talk about what the impact is going to be and why this is going to hold down the mill rate and but just the grant list and bring potential buyers for their home to town and allow people who are going to take care of them so they can age in place, and stay in their homes. I mean, that's what happens when you have a forum with residents and you answer their questions and and you tell them no, it's not going to be crime, and no, it's not going to lower their property values. And but again, if the town is kind of in a rush to approve this development and move ahead, good luck. That's fine. Do what they want. But given the fact of what the town's been through this year and the fact that they have a housing committee now that's full of very thoughtful people, I might if I were you guys, tell them to just kind of hold their horses for a little while, and let's educate the town about what is possible there. And let's bring in, Dominic says he can bring in 2 or 3 developers. I could get you 10 developers who would show you what they could do on that property. I mean, I know one guy who in Simsbury, which is also a very lovely town like Woodbridge, did 84 units in the north part of town, and it's a combination of single family homes, which he's built, but it's also some townhouses and duplexes and some congregate housing, and it's lovely. And like I said, he's not the only guy. There are a lot of developers who could offer the town lots of different ideas. And would they pass muster? I would think some of them might, especially after you've had a couple of forums in town and people kind of get the idea of what we're talking about. Remember what I said at the beginning: nobody knows what housing is. They all think affordable housing is the projects. They all imagine the worst when they think of who's going to live in it and what the ambiance is going to be. And that's all baloney. So, I mean, again, it's really up to the town. I'm not going to tell anybody what to do here, but if you ask me, I would advise everybody to hold their horses and not make a judgment. See what else is out there. It's kind of like nobody buys, the first TV they see. They shop around and they look for the best buy and the best quality.
So I think number one, Chris, if you'll invite them to our meeting next Wednesday. I will say one thing. I'm on this version, the Cisco WebEx on my iPad. I'm assuming that if I were on my laptop, I didn't have to go on the laptop, but I'm assuming you could screen share very easily on this platform also, as you can. I'm more used to Zoom.
You
But-
can screen share very easily. We've done this all throughout the long hearing process that we had
Right.
with town planning and zoning last year.
So if they, they know who we are, and I think if they want to come and they can screen share and we can have some interesting conversations about it. I mean, but I do want to, like I said, I've had some conversations, and I'm conveying to you that there is this fear: if we change it, it'll get voted down and never come back up again. I disagree with that. I disagree. I'm of the opinion we aim high. You try to address. I think one of the things is, never mind talking about affordable housing. When you want to get a lot of affordable housing, you've got developers have to pay for it, and in order for them to pay for it, they need density. The only economic development that will generate positive tax base for Woodbridge is high density residential housing. We don't have anything else anywhere else in town. We have nobody interested in building a power plant. And we don't have Route 1, and we don't have Bridgeport Avenue. So 3 strikes, you're out. The only thing left, as you will see, is higher density housing. Convincing the town of that may be a difficult thing, but you could do a great combination of it. And I was told that the numbers that I talked about in my memo to P&Z during the meeting that I wrote as a citizen of Woodbridge would scare the hell out of people. Is what I was told. So, but I do think we need to be forthright and express our opinions as the Housing Opportunities Committee, because that's our job.
Deb, were you suggesting that we would meet with this developer and express our opinions about this development's proposal specifically?
Well, Kathy, is that I mean, I think that we have to convey what we propose. You know what I mean? What we want, or at least ask questions of them.
I was thinking more in terms of meeting with the Board of Selectmen and kind of mapping out what we feel as the Housing Study Committee, what is needed for Woodbridge to address our current needs and our future needs. and how this is a golden opportunity to be able to do that. I mean, we talked about needs. I mean, we talked about, no places to downsize. I it's just interesting because the plan of conservation and development 5 years ago clearly pointed that out, that the demographics in Woodbridge was changing, and the demographics in Woodbridge showed that people were getting older. And this plan said that you needed to create housing opportunities for people to downsize, and that was 6 years ago, and we haven't addressed it. So it's not like we don't know the need is there. um so I think it's just trying to be real in terms of what we need in order to have a vibrant community. I mean, we talked about having our teachers being able to live in town. We talked about having our policemen being able to live in town. That those are good things. I think those are things that we want to aspire to. And I, you know, so I think that's the messaging that we need to give to our board of selectmen, that we need, here's an opportunity to be able to do some of these housing opportunities.
I agree that, we could, that the Board of Selectmen did ask and Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong. The Board of Selectmen asked the developers to talk to all the committees, uh, or
They asked them to talk to not everybody, but
Yeah.
in particular, you, planning and zoning, inland wetlands, commissions, committees, agencies that would be part of the whole process in some way, shape, or form. So they definitely were supposed to come to you.
okay, and we don't have to smash them. I mean, we can certainly ask reasonable questions about their development and whether or not they felt it was economically feasible to do other things. Those are appropriate questions, and express what our feeling is and what we have learned in our brief time period together, what we have learned as a committee as to the housing needs in this community.
John,
Yeah.
we could easily take up a lot of time talking to these developers. Can we put a time limit on it so that we can also do the business of the committee?
Certainly. I mean, we don't have to.
Because
I,
we have to talk about other things as
yeah. No, I think we can still. I think we can hopefully devote, maybe 20 minutes of it to the meeting to that, and focus on that. Let them make a brief presentation and let us make a presentation. Maybe it'll stretch to a half an hour, but we can get on to our business after that. Like I said, the Board of Selectmen wants them to talk to us. And our next step would be to have this joint meeting with the town boards that are involved, and as part of that housing thing with David present and explaining to them and going through the housing issues, but also to bring up the fact. I mean, we have to be honest with them and say this is what our um, you know what we have learned is that this piece of property, the Woodbridge Country Club, is a piece of property that is right in the center of our table, so to speak.
What else can I tell you guys?
How you convince everybody in the town to vote our way when it comes to the referendum.
Education, I think David said
Yeah.
it very clearly. We need,
David, that's the biggest thing, is educating the town on the various things like you pointed out. There is a housing shortage. We need housing. The example you gave was absolutely great. And I think that's a perfect thing of the young couple that wants to come back to Woodbridge, the young singles that want to come back to Woodbridge. We got to provide housing for them to come back there. Then they'll stay and buy one of the houses that exist, and the people in the houses that exist will go into the housing that they want. That was a great example of what we need.
I mean, I was just looking at your median age. I mean, the state's median age is 41 and Woodbridge is 49. mean, you have one of the older towns in the state, and
Mhm.
need to bring that number down.
Well, in Woodbridge, we say, 80 is the new 49. So,
Oh, there you go.
uh, anybody else got anything else for David?
I mean, David, do we need to, by when do we need to schedule with you to be sure that we get on
Well,
your
I mean, I think Chris was very smart about this. I mean, to appropriately ask the people who want to meet and where they want to meet and how they want to meet. But I would say that I'm hearing from other towns and we're penciling in dates, and we can always cancel. So it would be good to put a date or dates on the calendar soon, and we can move them around if necessary or change them. But I think sooner is better than later because you want to give people some notice, in advance of the meeting so that they come.
Yeah, we have to advertise it. So we have to get it far enough away so that we can be sure that we get an audience but quick.
Right.
David, is a week from Wednesday too late to give you a date? October 6th?
No, I mean,
Get a hold
I'm hearing today. I heard from West Haven, and I heard from Madison and New Haven, and last week I heard from Wallingford and North Branford, and I mean I'm trying to get these dates on the calendar, not so much for me but for them, because like I said, you want to have attendance at the meeting, and so you want to be able to publicize.
David, would you be free at this point, to your knowledge, on the 25th, which is a Monday?
Yeah, Mondays and Thursdays are good for me. I teach on Tuesday and Wednesday evenings.
Okay. Would you then perhaps pencil us in for the 25th?
Of October? Sure.
Yeah.
Uh,
Because
uh,
I
that's
think
for-
that avoids meetings
Yeah.
from all those major boards and commissions that they want to meet with.
what time, Chris?
We can try 7.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to juggle. I have a planning and zoning in Ansonia that night, so I will just have to be on both my computer and the iPad, because now with WebEx and Zoom, I can clone myself to go attend 2 meetings in 2 different towns. But I have a planning and zoning presentation that night. Shouldn't be that long, but I'll bounce back and forth between both.
I was gonna try to do it in person in the auditorium of the center building if I can.
Then I'll probably do my zoning presentation from one of the rooms outside in the auditorium.
Okay. We can
And,
find a space for you.
Yeah, and I can do that because it is as far as I know, Ansonia is still zooming everything.
Okay. So I will clarify whether it's in person or via WebEx, and I'll confirm with the boards and let you know, and I'll have that by next Wednesday.
This would be recorded, right, Chris?
Yes, Pooh is on board right now, but I'm sure she has somebody that can step in and record for us. And then she can also, I believe, run it on the public TV. It would be posted on the YouTube channel, so people would have the opportunity to view it even if they can't participate live.
Chris, you're thinking the right way.
All right,
Essentially.
and Chris, you'll let us know if we put the other people,
Gonna check with them
developers
tomorrow,
on the
yes.
agenda. Okay. All right, and any other items you want on the agenda? Any members, please email me, and I'll add it to the agenda that we need. And if I have to drop a few out, I'll try to prioritize as best I can. But I'll put everything on the agenda. We can work our way through it. We don't get to it, we won't get to it. But I think it's important that we have at least a conversation with the developers, like the first selectman, like the board of selectmen wants us to do. Okay, David,
Yeah.
as always,
Well,
thank you. Anybody else want to make any comments before we close it up? David, thank you very much.
Oh, you're
I really
welcome.
appreciate
You guys
it.
are great.
As usual, and we look forward to working with you to bring this to a successful conclusion. Okay?
We'll all do our best, right?
All right.
Okay, good night.
Thank you very much. Good night, everybody.
Everybody.